alive! It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
Hello and welcome to Alive After Reading. I'm your host, Tim Niederreiter, and with me today is a new guest to the show, as many of them are lately, Gage Greenwood. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, it's great to have you. I have been following, well, as you're a fellow Vella author, I mean, tell the listeners a little bit about yourself and the sort of stuff you write.
So I write dark fiction mostly. It doesn't stay necessarily in the horror realm, sometimes fantasy, sometimes sci-fi, but it always has a dark tone to it. Sometimes a comedic dark tone, but a dark tone nonetheless.
Well, hey, I mean, that's good times. I mean, I'm a fan of a number of dark fantasy things. I'm mostly a fantasy and sci-fi author and reader. But anyway, some of my favorite fantasies like Joe Abercrombie, that kind of thing. Like some really bleak stuff from the traditional world. So, Gage, what's your serial about, and your main serial that you've been working on for a few months now?
Yeah, so it's called Winter's Myths, and it's about a father and his daughters. They were raised underground by a small society that kind of shunned humanity and fled Earth many years ago, and they were raised under there, so they have no experience with Earth or humans. They just know to fear them, and they've been trained to fight them and to protect their world. But then a disease hits their community, and they have to flee to Earth, and they come up to Earth with no experience of what it is and very afraid, and they find that most of humanity is gone. So they have to navigate through this world and try and figure out what any of it is. They don't know what a car is. They don't know what a television is. And as they're trying to survive, the father tells his daughters these mythologies that he makes up about our world to explain it all away.
Oh, that sounds like a real fun way to tell a story, honestly. The reader, there's a lot of room for dramatic irony, where the reader doesn't understand. The reader knows more than the characters. They understand.
And that happens a lot.
Okay, that sounds like fun. Yeah. So, how's publishing been on Vella for you?
It's been great for me. As a new author, I put out a couple short stories before I jumped on Vella, and I jumped on a little bit late. I know most people started over the summer. I came in at the end of October. And I kind of just got lucky, really. I just promoted to the right places, I guess, and connected with the right authors. And it took off pretty fast. So it's been great for me. It's been a wild ride. I wasn't expecting anybody to see it. And when I get those messages once in a while from somebody who's like, "Oh, I read your series. I love it." It just makes my day. So.
Oh, nice. Yeah. I've still don't get a lot of feedback even for my books or my serials right now, but it's, when the stuff I've gotten is really positive, and it really helps me out too. I don't know, but I gotta say, your serial's doing really well, obviously, and it's exciting to pick your brain a little bit about this. Obviously, are you fairly new to the writing game, or have you just not published before?
Yeah, I've been writing for a long time, decades. Okay. And I did get into the publishing game a little bit about 8 years ago, maybe. I found a publisher for a novel I wrote, but it didn't go well, and they ended up closing as a company. So, and then I went back to the real job stuff because I had a son. So I kind of put aside the trying to publish for about 6 years or so, and then when the pandemic happened, I said, "Why not try this again?" So,
oh yeah, well that's seems like it was a good decision at this point. I mean, I think, judging by the reaction you're getting to your serial, you're going to do pretty well in this field. Just my assessment. What do I know?
I hope that assessment is correct.
Yeah, so as far as your serial, it sounds like you have a pretty accessible concept there with Winter's Myths, because you're approaching this, I like the dramatic irony thing where it's a world that's, sure, it's apocalyptic, it's post-apocalyptic, but the reader's going to know it kind of implicitly, right? Because it's our world to some degree.
Yeah, so they know everything. I mean, one of the things that I find challenging about it is having to describe things from these characters' point of view that I know the reader knows, but I have to explain it the way they see it, and sometimes that's really difficult because I don't want to do these long descriptions of offense, but to them, offense is very strange.
That makes sense. You know, it's difficult. I've had difficulties with that at some points too. With one of my longer novels, it was set in this universe that doesn't have planets or stars. So describing anything in a setting was pretty difficult because I didn't want to use those words at first. Like, you know, what's a day and night? Those don't exist in this setting. These people have never been on a planet's surface. Yeah. Anyway, enough about that. I talk about my stuff enough. So when you approach writing a serial chapter, do you see it as kind of a complete, like a TV episode, or is it more like, how do you approach that? Is it that long? Is it something, you know, how long are your chapters, number one? And number two, what kind of chunk of story do you see them as?
Okay, so my chapters typically aren't very long, usually between like 1,000 to 1,500 words. Sometimes they go a little over that. Sometimes they're a little shorter. But I kind of have two sets of episodes because I separate his myths. So you have this like main storyline with him and his daughters trying to survive, and then when he goes to tell them a story where he's trying to make sense of their world, that's kind of its own story.
Oh, cool.
So that gets its own chapters, and those tend to be a little shorter because I wanted them to be from the perspective of him telling his daughter a story in between beats in their action. So, you know, they're afraid all of the time. They're constantly in a state of panic. So his stories aren't going to be these long-winded, you know.
Yeah. That's one thing. I mean, even so, the whole reminiscent narrator or storyteller element of even novels, it can get weird if the story gets too detailed too. If you're like, oh, I included all, if the details included aren't salient, then it feels like, wow, this character's writing a book auditor, you know, just out loud, and exactly. That doesn't always make sense, especially in a setting where they're not recording it.
Right, exactly. And then in terms of whether it's like a TV episode, maybe if the TV show is like Lost, where there's things that will get thrown back from, you know, many episodes ago. But otherwise, I would say no. I would say, I mean, there's a cliffhanger. I try and do a cliffhanger at the end of each one, but I'll have a character who's been gone for 20 episodes reappear. And I don't try and like re-explain it for anyone who might
okay, so they're not as self-contained as a TV episode would be typically.
Yeah,
or like as far as I remember anyway. Obviously, a lot of TV shows now they don't do a whole lot of self-contained stuff, but yeah, the old school, you know, 22 episode season prime, you know, TV drama or whatever. Yeah, that's not happening.
No.
That encourages me a little bit because mine are also pretty short. My chapters are like, a lot of them are skirting the minimum number of words, like 600 to 1,000 words in a lot of cases.
I think it's beneficial. I mean, the platform is being promoted as something you can pick up and read in between doing whatever you got to do for the day. And that's how Amazon's promoting it. So that's what readers are going to be looking for. I know there are definitely people who write 4,000, 5,000 word episodes that are doing quite well. But I think typically shorter episodes are more what the reader's looking for.
Definitely when I read stuff on Vella, I don't want to see a whole wall of text that just keeps going.
Me too.
I often skip to the bottom of the chapter just to see how long it is. Like, I'll say, how long am I scrolling here?
Me too.
And sometimes I just quit because I'm like, I don't want to read that much of this right now. I'll go back and I'll save that for later. Yeah.
I read 3 things at once. I always read. I have a physical novel that I read right before I go to bed, so I don't get the screen in my eyes right before bed. And then I have something on ebook that I'm usually reading for like when I go out for a cigarette break or something like that. And then I read a Vella, an episode here and an episode there when I get a chance. And I need it to be that quick move through pacing, or I can't. I'd rather just pull up an ebook.
Yeah, it makes sense to me. I think we're on the same page there, so to speak. So, just in general, when you approach, because you're talking, how many chapters do you release a week with this serial?
I do 3.
Okay, so that's a pretty reasonable amount of words to do in a week. Even that's like 5,000 words, something like that, 3,000 to 5,000 words.
Yeah, around there. I'm also working on a novel that I'm going to be putting out this year, and then re-editing some old short stories I wrote. So I'm writing quite a bit of words a week, but it's not all for Winter's Myths.
Okay. Well, I mean, that, again, seems smarter than what I'm doing with my 10 serials at a time. That's like a full-time job just to keep them rolling. And then trying to write a novel on top of that. But hey.
But
whatever.
You do, some of your serials connect with each other, right?
Yeah, some of them are in the same universe. But they don't,
Yeah, I think
otherwise
that's cool.
they don't connect, yeah. I mean, the one of them, I guess, like, there's 2 sets of 2 that are in the same universe, yeah. But those are both in separate universes. So it's not a big block of 4, obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, just so people understand what I'm trying to say and are not confused. Yeah. So yeah, I've got the Maker ones, and then there's these 2 fantasies that are very weird and very far apart in their settings, so that you might not even be able to guess they were the same. They were connected. Yeah, but yeah, when I write, generally, I mean, again, my ADHD really helps here because I have to write 4 or 5 chapters a day because I'm trying to update each serial multiple times a week now.
Yep.
And I don't write, and some of them I actually have a backlog for. Like, some of them I've written whole novels in, and I'm just serializing old novels.
Yep.
But then other ones other ones are being written from scratch, and actually I've got so many on the docket now, it's insane because I've fallen behind a little bit. But hey, whatever. Got to try it. And the publishing bonus, we don't get any specifics about that. The bonus that Kindle Vella gives out seems to be pretty substantial just for publishing chapters. And that, to me, is pretty encouraging. So that's why I've kind of doubled down this month.
Yeah. That's understandable. And that's actually, I have a second serial that I'm going to be putting out next week. And it's still so strange because for me, as a new author who wants to make this a career, I felt it was very beneficial to just have the one series because then I can sort of hone all of my resources into that, spend all of my time focused on promoting that, get my family and friends reading that. And, they can only crown one series a week. I didn't want to kind of dilute where everybody was putting their focus. But I have this other serial that I've been working on, and I didn't want to just keep it sitting on the computer getting dust anymore. And because Amazon is, rewarding just publishing, I decided to just use a pen name, and I'm going to put this out and kind of keep it to myself, and just, if it gets reads, it gets reads, and if it doesn't, it doesn't. And I'll tell some of my, people, the readers that I know, like my friend Emily, I'll tell her about it and say, don't crown this one, stick to Winter's Myths, but if you want to read it, it's there. Yeah.
That's cool. I've been thinking about that kind of thing about just in general, the kind of art or media. I'm not sure what people think of a serial book as, a serial story as, but it's a kind of it's a creative thing that people consume for entertainment. And I've been thinking a lot about the kinds of entertainment that I don't know, go viral is kind of the cliche, but they really resonate with people in general, and they kind of start gathering a following. And often they seem like they're pretty simple. I mean, games like Undertale, or I'm at a loss to think of, or like, weirdly, to go way back at this point, but like Garfield, the Garfield cartoon, huge, ridiculously influential thing. That started off as it's like a 3-panel newspaper comic with minimal characters. Like, it doesn't really have much going on. And
pretty much close to all of those, like, 3-panel comics had like almost the same punchline every week.
Exactly.
Just told in a slightly different way.
Yeah, exactly. How simple can something be that then takes off and develops a life of its own? It's wild.
Yeah. Sometimes it's that. I think it's just that simplicity. That just, you don't have to put too much thought into it. It's a nice little break from where your mind is all day long, and you get that little repetitiveness. So you know what to expect, but they just change it enough that you get to see that expectation warped just a little bit, you know?
That's a good point. I mean, now it's giving me all sorts of ideas just thinking about it in those terms. Honestly, the keeping it even, making it simpler, like what we are doing with the Vella stories, those serialized fiction. That's not that different from a novel when it's finished, I'd imagine. At least it's my theory. That's why I'm approaching it with some of my old novels, obviously.
Yeah, I think I make it a little more cliffhangery. And with the Vella, keep in mind I'm only writing one, so I have a little more free time, I think.
Yes.
I'll sometimes go on little tangents with side characters that I probably wouldn't do if it was in a novel. But otherwise, yeah, I think it's
I mean, some of the content's a little different, but the flow of the story is similar.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that makes sense. So when you obviously you said you do a bunch of writing other than for your serial right now, and then you've got this other serial that you're presumably editing, I guess. The new one, the secret one.
I'm already.
Oh, it's already on the way. It's coming out. What I meant is that you already had that all written before you even just decided to serialize it. That's what it sounded like.
I had the base written.
Okay.
Start. Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. So what's your kind of work day look like when it comes to writing? I mean, if you have a day job or whatever, how do you fit it in the work around that?
So my schedule is wonky. I actually don't have a job right now. I was before pre-pandemic. I was working like 60 hours a week. I was the vice president of an escape room company, actually.
Wow.
And then once the pandemic ended, I could have went back, but it just financially made more sense for me to stay home with my son and let my girlfriend be able to do a little more on her work, because the more she's able to do, the more she makes, and she makes a lot more than I do. So it was beneficial for me to stay home with my son. But I couldn't do that forever. So I kind of, that's where my publishing started, was because I was like, I'm going to give myself a year to see what I can make of all this stuff. So I have my son, and I have to work around his schedule.
Okay.
Yeah. So I kind of, I don't ever really get like, oh, here's 3 hours I'm going to write. I just don't get that. I wish I did. So I kind of just like, I'll write on a cigarette break. I'll take 10 minutes here to write and edit. I have the YouTube channel, so I have to like edit those videos and like, do interviews and plan out what I'm going to ask the next guest and do all that stuff. So I have like a ton of stuff. I have this like backlog of stuff that I just kind of like look at and say, all right, here's what I can do right now for the next 5 minutes, and then just work on it.
Wow. Yeah. More power to you. That sounds pretty difficult to me, honestly. I mean, even though obviously, like I've said before, I'm bouncing all over these different projects, but I have so much time. That's my main strength, because I'm basically full time right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Between
that's what I'm hoping for. I'm hoping to get there.
Yeah. I don't actually make a full-time income yet from Vella, but hopefully soon.
Yeah.
Anyway, geez. So you've got you like your dark stuff, right? You approach with a horror bent. Is there some kind of I'm kind of curious how that works in a serial, obviously, because I have this kind of instinct that makes me think horror means, like a Stephen King style thriller or like a slasher movie or something like that. Dark stuff I don't know. There's some kind of finality that seems like it comes along with that sometimes. Yeah.
I would say that this Vella isn't as much horror as I typically write, but it is there. It's kind of hovering at all times. So it's more, there's like this sort of epic adventure dystopian element where they're trying to survive. And then there are monsters that do come at some point later in the story. So that's where the horror element comes in. But then his myths are like a fantasy comedy sort of, because he sees he sees a picture of the Lincoln Memorial, and he thinks, oh my God, there's this giant ice monster here. And so he tells his kids the story about Abe Lincoln, the ice giant, So those are a little more, they kind of get to break up some of the darker elements with these little comedic stories that come into play.
Well, cool. Interesting stuff. I think there must be those like kind of there's those charming moments sound like those always stand out to me in a story when I'm reading. Like, you know, where it's like yeah, this is because I write a lot of, you know, fantasy adventure. I not super dark, but it is violent and there's lots of action and stuff. And I think when it slows down for a second, or when the character's like, well, this is kind of a cute moment, that always stands out to me when I'm writing myself. I don't know. And when I'm reading, obviously, that's some of my favorite stuff. Even I'm almost regardless of the kind of story.
Yeah, I think I struggled a little bit with that in the beginning. I mean, you had the cute stories that he was telling, but with the actual characters themselves, I knew that I was playing a long game, so I'm withholding information, you know, that's going to get released at some point. And I think at the beginning I did that a little too much, and I realized like, oh, I've been throwing all this stuff at these characters, but they haven't even had an episode to grieve yet. They just lost their entire community, you know.
Oh yeah.
So when it does happen, I kind of really pour it on, but it did take a little bit to get there.
Yeah, that's a really insightful thing to point out, is that the characters, if you don't know what they're thinking, if you don't get inside their heads and get into their, you know, the moments where they're not, you know, struggling to survive or running away from a crashing helicopter or something, whatever it is, that depending on the kind of story, if you don't know the character, the stakes are kind of automatically lower for the story.
Right. Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
For the reader. Anyway.
And that was, I wanted to keep a lot of the information about their community a secret, because there's a lot of revelations that come with that. But at the beginning, I didn't add enough to make it where the reader could see that and say, oh, what, you know, this is a big deal. Like, this was a really big deal to them, because they didn't know what their community was. So I fixed that. I had to work on that. But yeah, at the beginning, I kind of held back a little too much. I'm planning this. I'm hoping this series runs for like hundreds of episodes. So
yeah, that is. You know, I was going to say that's what we all hope, but I'm not sure if I hope that for all mine. I mean, I think some of mine could end after 50 or 60 episodes, and I'd be happy.
yeah, for sure.
I have too many of them. I could thin those ranks a little bit.
Yeah.
Though I guess one of them is going to be at least 100 episodes. I know that because I already have like 70 in the can, because it was 2 novels back to back, and then I'm like, these will go right together, and then anyway.
I thought Winter's Myths would have each season would be like 30 episodes, and I just finished writing episode 55. And I haven't even finished the first season yet. So.
Well, hey, that seems like you're going to get a whole novel worth of words out of that, judging by your episode length. So
I think so, yeah.
Because I like the one I released, Warrior Online, the one that I released as a novella, is only like 30,000 words for the first season.
Yeah.
And that one I probably should wrap up after a couple more seasons and not go. It may not ever reach 100 episodes. It's like 90 maybe.
I'm curious how to end my season into book form, because there's so many unanswered questions at the end of the first season. I don't know if I'm going to get a lot of angry readers from that.
I mean, as long as they're not the question, right? If you have got a question from I find that bookends are really helpful when writing a novel. I'm not sure, but if you're writing and if you treat it like that, like, okay, what's the big question at the beginning of the book? At the beginning of the story, or one of the, because you're doing a serial, it's, you know, you're imagining there will be multiple books in this series once it's in book form. You might go with like the second question, maybe, because one of them is your serious question, and the next one is your book question. That might be something to guide you. Obviously, they have to be major questions. It can't be like, what's this character's name? That doesn't matter, unless it's the thing. I don't know. Yeah, it's just my 2 cents there. Obviously,
Yeah, no, that's a good call.
So anyway, I guess we're running out of time here because I screwed up with technical difficulties a little bit earlier. And so, Gage, tell people where they can find your books and, your serial and your other stuff on the internet, your YouTube channel and so on.
Yeah, so the serial's on Kindle Vella. It's called Winter's Myths. And then I have 2 short stories you can find on Amazon from Gage Greenwood. One's called Through Flickering Lights, a Silhouette, and the other is called Grackles on the Feeder. And my YouTube channel is called Gage Greenwood Writes. So If you look up Gage Greenwood, you'll find it all.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Easy. And you've got one of those nice names that's easy to spell, basically consisting of words that people already know. Anyway, which is all it's just convenient. So thanks so much for being on the show. It's been a lot of fun, and I'm glad I got to pick your brain a little bit about this topic because it's my job now, kind of. So, so it's important for me to learn a little bit from somebody who's ahead of me a bit in the process as far as getting readership. And yeah,
Awesome.
yeah. Oh, sorry. Go on.
Oh no.
As for this podcast, you can find us at mentalcellularpublications.com. You can find my books on timniederwriter.com/books, or you can find my serials. I guess I should say you can find the serials at timniederwriter.com/serialized-fiction. Thanks for listening, everybody. Go check out some serials. They're fun. You can read them on your phone or on your Kindle Fire, I guess now. So take a look, everybody. Now they're on Android. They're on iPhone. Pretty much that's what we got for phones these days. So I'm sure you'll have the app. You can read them wherever. Thanks for listening, and have a good week, everybody. Bye-bye.
That tears it.